It's Valentine's Day as I record this, and I'm ecstatic to be able to share this day talking about a movie I love with two of the people that helped bring it into being. Adam the First tells the story of a 14-year-old boy named Adam who sets out to find his birth father after a series of circumstances forces him out of the home he grew up in. Now, joining me today are Adam himself, Oakes Fegley, and the writer, producer, director of Adam the First, Irving Franco. So, gentlemen, how you doing?
How you doing? Nice to be here. Thank you, Ian.
I'm
All
well.
right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cool. Well, Adam the First is one of those rare movies that evokes the feeling of reading a great coming of age novel. There are themes and motifs and spectacular character interactions that don't feel like just the contrivances of a normal screenplay. So, Irving, this wasn't based on a book. It came right out of your head, from what I understand. Can you tell me what inspired you to write this story and to tell it in the way that you told it?
Sure, I really appreciate you saying that. It's great to hear uh, from someone who's you really get it. I would say, I've mentioned this in the past, but um, with my first featured cheerleader, I was trying to jump into the high school genre and do something unique with it. And my feeling was if I could do the same old high school plot and keep it simple, but tell it in the style of the auteurs that I loved and infuse it with personal questions of mine and insecurities of mine and wonders of mine, then you might find that balance between I've seen this a million times and this is classic and a celebration of some timeless tropes, but at the same time, strangely, it's at the same time something I've never seen before and really fresh and seems personal to the artist. And striking that balance, dancing that line has become a fixation of mine in making movies. And so with Adam the First, I wanted to revisit the same approach, but with a completely different genre, maybe a completely different set of wonders and contemplations of my own. And I said, well, what if we dive next? We've done the high school thing. What if we dive next into the road story and the hero's journey and see what we can do with that and see what I can put into that is personal to me, so that yet again we can come around to this strange balance between I've seen this a million times and I love it, but I've never seen anything like this and I love it. This way it's personal and timeless and classic all at once. And my hope was that in returning now to a new genre and new archetypical elements, motifs, themes, etc., that would inspire new questions and personal sides of this, and keep it fresh. So same approach, new subject matter, hopefully new dish. That's my thinking. So yeah, there's a lot of hero's journey, which is as old as time itself. But there's a lot of me in it, which I hope people relate to, and that's really the approach I take, and I think doing things that way might stay with me for a little while.
It almost feels like a period piece because, I mean, it's about a 14-year-old kid and it's a contemporary film, but there aren't, cell phones, there's no
Right.
TikTok.
Right.
The modern world almost seems to invade in the latter half of the last act of this movie.
Yes.
There's a lot of kind of rural encounters, and I think that lack of intrusion really allows for some of this character exploration, making it more of a meditative picture. So, is that the way that you had kind of conceived it, or did the setting just kind of inform the way you told the story?
I really appreciate you saying that. That's actually a big part of how we conceived it. I made a big emphasis of that from day one in development. My feeling is that you know these these are the questions we're dealing with were as old as time itself and common to the human experience, regardless of when or where. And I felt that if in set design, costume design, and props, etc., world of story in general, we could we could avoid anything that was too period specific. We could hit that theme home of this being a human story wherever, whenever. And so it was never two 50s or 60s or 70s or 90s. We were always trying to find that balance between elements that would be common to all those periods, so that this was recognizable as, of course, more or less recent America and tied to that Americana, but never too hyper specific to current day or a specific period, so that we would be thrown out and say, oh, this is a specific story with a specific experience, time, and place. I want this to be universal, and an evergreen in a lot of ways. And so it was very much intentional. Very happy it's coming through that way.
Oakes, what was your kind of reaction to reading the screenplay and also talking with Irving about getting this movie out the ground? I saw that you and David Duchovny, your co-star, are executive producers on the film. So were you brought in at the ground floor? Did you discover this and want to get involved later? How did that happen? And what was your reaction to the character of Adam when you first encountered him on the page?
I don't remember every element of the process, but I immediately remember. Irving came to me with the script, and we had our like initial meeting. And I read the script, and immediately, like Irving said, those elements that he was trying to capture and bring to life, I felt them jump off the page, and I immediately looked at that hero's journey as something new that I could explore in that time of my life too, and a period of growth of anybody I was about a sophomore in high school, so it was like that pivotal time in my life too. So it was an interesting time for me. But immediately I had so much interest in it, and I wanted to talk to him about his vision and what he wanted to do. And yeah, I jumped on, and I wanted to talk to Irving about him letting me take a seat and hopefully making some of my own creative decisions here and there. And he was game for that. And it made the process of when we got onto set, we were filming every day. I was able to bounce so many amazing ideas off of him, and we had some really amazing times when moments just came to life out of the place and out of the people that we were with. And I think that it came to screen really well. And then, immediately I had known that it was going to be that sort of experience and that sort of film, and that sort of set that I wanted to be a part of. So, yeah.
So in terms of the kind of the back and forth, the input, because there's a bit of I think between the three of us, there's sort of a generational, possible multiple generational divide here. But Oakes, you were most closest to the character.
Yeah.
Did you find, as far as what you brought to the role, what did you adjust in terms of like making Adam more authentic to you? And Irving, in your collaboration, were there any blind spots that Oakes may have uncovered, as far as like, oh wait, this is actually, I know it's kind of a timeless story, but this is how kids think, because I haven't been a kid in a little while.
Yeah, I I could tell you, Oakes is pretty faithful to the script, but at the same time, there's so much that isn't written in there in terms of physicality and carrying yourself through these spaces. Also, in terms of how Oakes interacts in terms of facial expressions and physicality with each different player that comes up. There are a lot of different characters in this film, a lot of different father figures, all of them with a different way of carrying themselves. And Oakes had to figure out that way to kind of adjusting his physicality and carrying himself differently with each of those potential father figures, as if they were, in a sense, making a mark on him and helping shape his character along the way. That was not something that was necessarily written in a specific way, and that's not something that's in the dialogue necessarily. It's something that he had to figure out a way to emote and carry through the physicality. And I think a lot of that is what blew my mind. You wind him up and you set him free, and you see what he's going to do, and suddenly he's speaking to a father figure in the prison, suddenly a father figure on the farm, and he's carrying himself differently between the words because he's speaking to someone else. That I think is where I saw the most back and forth and wiggle room that was off the page. I was very impressed by that stuff.
Yeah,
as was I. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, jumping off of that, Irving, and the cast that you put together for for all of those different figures was obviously so, I mean, obviously so very intentional, but also through each of those worlds that you built for those different motifs, I think those interactions came out of that very naturally. And I think I thank you for mentioning that, because I mean that's something that I always look for in truly working off of other people. And um I mean, working with David Duchovny as well. I've mentioned this so many times, but he's an incredible person to work off of. So I mean, I love when I have somebody else that I can really bounce off of, be playful with. It makes everything feel so much more natural and comfortable, but it also brings a whole different element of life to everything. And
Yeah.
so that was something that I also, spent a lot of time, thinking about and working on, but also some of it that just comes out again naturally from interacting with those different actors. And yeah, that was the main exploration that I think I felt this really had me doing. It was jumping between all of these different
Yeah.
worlds and different elements of the character. Yeah.
A lot of the time I would be, we'd be wondering, oh, what kind of mood and vibe and tone is Oakes going to be like on set today? And it would be like, well, which father figure is he speaking with, and which father figure is he having a scene with today? And
Yeah.
in a lot of ways you were absorbing and a mirror to that stuff, which was really cool.
Now, Oakes, kind of picking up on that, you've played a lot of troubled, abandoned, alienated youths, from Pete's Dragon to the Goldfinch to the Fabelmans. But it does feel like there's something different going on with Adam. There's that almost a perfect balance of vulnerability and danger. Danger, which I was dreading the direction the film might have taken in one of the penultimate scenes. Fortunately, things played out a certain way, and I won't get into spoilers here. But what were some of the challenges that you faced in bringing these aspects of the character to life that you might not have faced in, other roles?
Well, something I think that's so interesting about Adam is that while, yes, he's been through all these situations and he's been left in this position, um, he still has, and he almost finds it through those circumstances, um, like a specific individuality as well. And he's trying to obviously find himself. And I think that independence that he almost finds is really cool. And you see that in some of these um, scenes where it's just Adam, walking through space and um, um, experiencing life in these different ways, maybe for the first time. Um, it's those elements of that I think were really cool to, again, physically portray that and show that. But yeah, I mean, something about Adam that's very different. I mean, I feel like he's also uniquely adaptive. I mean, he's very malleable almost in a way, where he meets these different people and he tries to let them teach him something about himself.
Yeah, there's this.
That was challenging, but it was also cool.
Yeah, I mean, I remember we spoke about it from early on, finding that interesting balance, like Ian said, between him being a rough and tough badass, and at the same time very vulnerable and tender and open to the world and contemplative. Because at that stage in life, that's very much what you teeter between. Um, and you did that beautifully. I think it's happening all at once, not in this kind of binary way. It's there at all times. This ability to survive and overcome the weather ahead, but at the same time, a tenderness and a humanity that is more childlike and open and full of wonder. That's always there, I think, throughout the film. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned these kind of archetypes on the hero's journey. There are, okay, Adam encounters a convict, a family man of God, an elderly artist, and a fourth person that I won't talk about
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the interest of keeping things fresh for the audience.
Sure.
What was it about these specific archetypes that you felt that Adam should encounter on his journey? There's a lot of different types of men
Yeah.
that he could find that could be his father, but these seem very deliberate. What were you trying to say here?
I appreciate that. I mean, I was trying to really get down to um, the most core categories that you might find in a fairy tale like this, and rather than speak to different ethnicities or different um, cultures or different places in the world, I thought it really comes down to um, types of people, which you'll see across all of the ethnicities and all of the cultures and geographical places and times that have existed. There are always going to be those who are kind of, you know, on the edge of the law and more of the might makes right types and the hedonists and you know the living in the underworld. There are always going to be those who are more spiritual and family oriented and seek those kinds of pursuits. And there are always going to be those who are creative and artistic and are beauty seeking. To me, that felt like a a good breakdown um, that we could rely on um, as all encompassing. And you know, I think there are of course variations and nuances in between and combined between the two. No person is only one of those things, but at its core, yeah, that just felt like the right split for this timeless fairy tale.
This is a question for both of you. In Irving, in conceiving this story and these archetypes and Adam's encounter with them, and Oakes in embodying this character, did you feel like you went on a journey as well, having to think about these larger issues presented by these characters that you were either drawing out of yourself in Irving's case or having to contend with on different, even just narrative levels, Oakes?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, as I mentioned it, I joined this project at also a pretty specific time in my life. And I'm only 19 now, and I'm still look at the world somewhat different every day, as I'm sure most people do. But you know, there's an element of this film that through Adam's eyes, I was able to maybe digest how individual everyone really is, and how no matter who you are, you have your own perspective and your own path that it took you to get there, and everyone has something to learn from every story, whether or not you can listen to it or not. But I think that was something really interesting, and I mean, that's something that I immediately take away from the story itself, but also from each of those individual interactions. Particularly, I think just yeah, looking at each of those figures and how they live their lives and maybe their mistakes, but also the things that are admirable about each of those men. Um, those are all very, very specific situations and specific traits that, um, you know, I felt were quite potent. Yeah, for sure.
I think for
And
me, I think for me in with a story like this, it's very much cathartic in that, you know, I and hopefully with the audience along with me, I'm taking this journey in seeking out a North Star, seeking out a way in which I'm supposed to see the world. And um, that works in kind of phases of, you know, these father figures who have a very specific viewpoint and framework through which they see things. Um, and in doing that, I'm kind of passing through what works and what doesn't work about each, and finding along the way that there is certainly, at the very least, even if these questions can't get answered, um, there is a common denominator between all of them, no matter what. There's a humanity. There's the great sense of longing that they've had, the difficulties of life. They've all gone through a form of loss. Um, whether it be loved ones or their ideals and dreams. Um, they're all going through the timeless struggle of being a person, and that, I think, is where things round out and land and settle for me. It's an emotional journey for sure, um, through processing how to see things, coming to a conclusion about not being able to come to conclusions necessarily, ultimately.
And I think, again, not giving anything away, the movie ends on some very big, questions that I would love to know the answers to, but it's like life. It could go either direction. And one of the things I appreciate is I assume that based on the previous, hour and a half or whatever, the answers aren't going to be, or the resolutions aren't going to be easy. They're not going to be movie solutions.
Right.
There are so many times watching this film where I braced myself because I'm like, okay, this happened, so this is going to happen, which leads to this, this, and this. But I think at every turn, you chose in your writing to go in a non-obvious manner. For example, there's a scene where the police become involved because Adam is staying with a family. And I expected the big blow up, the big showdown. It ended, it felt more emotionally honest for what Adam, where your character was in that moment to make the decision that he did. I'm sorry I'm being so vague, folks, but
No, it's
I
fine.
can't give anything away.
No, you're doing a great job of dancing the line there. It's a
Thank you.
tightrope walk, but that's great. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I appreciate you saying that.
On that note, there are a couple of very interesting modes of transportation in this film. One involves a horse chase, and there's a house on wheels. Not things you expect to see in a modestly budgeted, I assume, independent
Yeah.
feature. Irving, when you were coming up with these, did you think, can we swing the house on wheels? Do we have the insurance to have our main star on horseback? Oakes, was that you on horseback riding across that field?
For the most part, there's a couple. I think there's one shot that's Jace, my stunt double. But for the rest of it was me, and that was really cool. We also I loved driving. There was like a 70s, I think it was 71 muscle car. What was it, Irving?
It's escaping.
Charger? Was it a Charger? Something like that.
Mustang, old Charger type.
Yeah.
But
it was amazing though.
It was a
And
beat
then
up jalopy. We loved it. It was really good. But yeah, on the note of transportation, I love I love that you're catching all these things. It means it's coming through. I feel great about that. I mean, at the outset, my feeling was one of the joys of a really great road adventure is watching the character figure out how to move along in the face of changing situations and circumstances, weather, obstacles, etc. And so maybe you start out needing to get the mode of transportation and you get that vehicle, but then what happens when it breaks down? And then what if you're in a situation where you need to escape? What happens then? And so I started getting excited structurally, not only about the places on the map that we were going to go, which were really dynamic and full of interesting personalities and landscapes, but the intervals in between, how you get from one to the next, and how the modes of transportation can serve as a really fun bridge from one mindset and aesthetic and atmosphere to another. And that became a whole fun thing in itself. And I think that's actually where a lot of the action of the film, or at least the physicality, starts to play out. Because when he's with these characters, a lot of the time he's sitting down and having a great conversation with them and getting to know the way they see the world. But then in between each of these moments is where a lot of the wild stuff happens, the physicality, the horseback, the car rides, etc. That cool stuff. So bouncing between the two was really important.
Well, I started off by referring to kind of comparing this movie to a novel. But your movie ends with a cinematic flourish that it's impossible to replicate on the page, and it involves a very long tracking shot or an extended pan across a room.
Yeah.
Tell me about pulling that scene off in terms of just conceiving it as you're writing it? I mean, did you see the movie in your head as you were writing it? Were there other versions of this conversation turned revelation? And also, I'm not ashamed to admit it, I cried during the last
Right.
5 minutes of this movie. Sustained tears, and that's not an exaggeration. Like, there's a moment that kicks everything off, and I didn't wipe my eyes until the screen went black.
Well,
So,
that means a
as
lot. That
well, in
means
terms
a
of
lot. Thank you. Thank you.
thank you. But as far as like filming that and sustaining that emotional beat. So yeah, 2 questions. 1, conceiving this
Yeah.
and executing it, and B, 2, sustaining that emotion. How many takes did it take to get this
Yeah.
down?
So it was originally conceived differently. One of the first things I actually ever came up with for the story was the way in which that revelation was going to happen. It was going to happen in a different atmosphere, in a different setting.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the beautiful things about making a movie is that practical obstacles start to push you to get creative and think outside of the box to accommodate. And so Mississippi had a ton of amazing locations, which we were able to get and match to the page. But when it came to what I had originally intended for the last scene, there was no such location, that type at least. And so I started to have to think about what kind of locations were available and what felt like timeless America. And the setting that the end of the film takes place in felt like a great alternative. And so then I said, well, we have to make it really interesting, and we have to draw it out in the way that you're referring to. And so I knew that we needed to take a long take. Originally, I was going to pull back in one way, but then the space was exciting, and I wanted to do something wider. My DP suggested, what if we still do the long take thing, but we do it I said, well, maybe we'll do a tracking shot. Maybe then we'll do the pull back. And then he said, well, maybe we just do a combination with zoom. You go back and forth, and then you get excited. And I knew for sure that in my alternative, I was going to have a very long, drawn out take that was going to lead to the final revelation. I'll say that. How it was physically set up had to be worked out. But once we knew that, then it's so funny trying to talk about this stuff without saying anything. Once we knew that, then we had to take multiple takes of it. You do a zillion takes, and then of course, as it always goes, the magic was in the first one, and I'm pretty sure that's the first take that you saw.
Wow. So Oakes, I mean, you, as I recall it, because I watched this about a week ago. So you're in that scene, or you're in the shot that establishes the long pan, and then we see you towards, kind of at the end. Were you there for the entire filming of that, trying to I mean, did you get coverage of Oakes while he was performing?
Oakes was there the whole time during every single one of those long takes.
Yeah.
We did one punch in to get one specific reaction as a just in case. But if you wanted to, you could watch that take all the way through without the cut in. And it's there, and Oakes is there, and he's doing his thing. He's rocking out.
So
yeah, that was something that I remember as well. We did a bunch of we did do a bunch of different coverage for
like
that.
10, 12 takes in a row, and long ones.
We had a lot, and I remember the conversation with you and Danny in the back of the place.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I mean, it was a long scene, but it was just something you had to feel out. There's nothing else I can really say without giving too much away. I don't know.
in terms of that feeling, I mean, as what I'm assuming is a very long day, and a lot of it is setups and filming and going back and trying to try different things. Were you able to hold on to that emotional core of what you needed to do, or did you find yourself, was the effect wearing off by the end of the day? And perhaps that's one of the reasons that first take was the magic one.
Sometimes it is difficult. I mean, I'll be honest. It just depends on so many different circumstances. But yeah, I mean, that's a question for Irving. I don't know. I don't remember.
I think Oakes did great all the way through. Honestly, it's just funny. Sometimes the take that everything's got to line up right. Sound's got to line up. Camera moves got to line up. The lighting's got to be right. The performance has to be right, of course. other elements that I won't speak of that you guys know I'm referring to have to be right in this case. And so the magic's in the first take, but it could be because that's the one where everything lined up. It's not necessarily always a question of the actors wearing out. They could have been best performances in the last take. I don't know. But maybe camera slipped or some other element happened, or boom dips down. You never know. But the first take, I think, it's kind of like looking for apartments. At least in Manhattan, you find an apartment you're excited about, and part of is like, I should probably keep searching. It's weird to just settle on the first one. Let's go for a few more just in case. But then you realize, oh, that first one was the one. And so in Manhattan, you don't have that luxury. You got to just jump on it on the first one. But with making a movie, you kind of go for the safety. Like, all right, let's just film it 10 more times just in case. But everyone agrees that the first one was amazing, right? And that's how it goes sometimes.
Well, and appropriately, the movie is called Adam the First, which is, it's in select theaters now. Folks can check out the Electric Entertainment website, which will be linked below for more information. And Irving and Oakes, thank you very much for taking some time to hang out and talk about this truly remarkable film with me. I'm not kidding, folks. You got to bring some tissues with you to the theater to see this, because you're going to be a wreck. And if you're not, then you got a whole other journey to go on. But yeah, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ian. This was great. Great to see you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was good to see you.
All right.
So much,
Take care, guys.
Take care.
Bye.